Part 23. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuchi. Chapter 221. That's good. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's explanation, Solitsi sighed with relief, then slowed down the car and turned to look at Zhang Fenjai. Then, her face turned as shy as a red apple, and her eyes revealed all kinds of tenderness as she whispered a reminder. Yi, let's go home directly. Then, she quickly turned her head and looked forward, holding the steering wheel tightly with her jade hands. Not noticing the tenderness in Solitsi's eyes, nor realizing the true meaning of going home directly, Zhang Fenjai followed her suggestion and replied. Sister Lizzie, of course we will go home directly. Snort. Zhang Fenjai's uninteresting reply made Solitsi suddenly feel a sense of frustration and loss, which made her feel quite unhappy. After snorting, she stepped on the accelerator and accelerated past the Vegeti Veyron, turning the wheel she was considering. Zhu Zhenjun, who was involved in the real estate business, was shocked. It seems that my sister-in-law is angry. Seeing the BMW sports car that was constantly pulling away from him like a gust of wind, Zhu Zhenjun also accelerated to catch up and began to guess in a low voice. But that's not right. My brother rushed to the resort tirelessly, and then took the risk to rescue her from the kidnappers. This is the most classic hero saving a beauty, and he deserves to achieve the good things he promised. When Zhu Zhenjun guessed that what he had promised would achieve good things, he suddenly thought that Zhang Fenjai was still an ignorant virgin, and he vaguely guessed the real reason why Solitsi was angry. This made Zhu Zhenjun feel very happy. At the same time, he immediately took out his mobile phone and started writing text messages, so that the brother he truly recognized could say goodbye to his virgin status completely and become a real man. Zhang Fenjai, who was wondering why the fine Solitsi suddenly became angry, felt the vibration of his cell phone in his pants and quickly took it out to take a look. On a good day, with a luminous cup of wine, let's go with the flow and have fun. I only smell it a few times a night, but I don't know if I can get up at dawn. Brother, come on. The straightforward and easy to understand jingle allowed Zhang Fenjai to immediately understand the true meaning of the text message. Although the jingle was quite sexual, it still allowed him to guess the reason why Solitsi was angry. When he thought about the opportunity to bid farewell to his virginity, but was rejected abruptly by himself, the self-blame and regret that emerged in his heart made him want to give himself a few loud slaps. At the same time, his unhappy mood made him just make up a word on his mobile phone. The word's reply is Zhu Zhenjun. Roll. After putting away the phone, Zhang Fenjai quietly observed Solitsi out of the corner of his sight, and found that apart from disappointment, there was not much anger in her eyes, and he suddenly had a plan to regain his virginity. Sister Lizzie, next Saturday is our traditional Mid-Autumn festival. I wonder if you have time. Work overtime, Solitsi, who was in a bad mood, replied without giving Zhang Fenjai a good look. Sister Lizzie, how about I discuss with the chairman and Mr. Shen to give you a few days of vacation? Zhang Fenjai gave up the idea of easing the relationship because of Solitsi's unpleasant refusal, and he suggested cautiously. What do you want to do? Solitsi turned around and glanced at Zhang Fenjai. While she continued to look at the road ahead, she suddenly asked with a hint of expectation in her heart. Sister Lizzie, I left Chusanjiang village for almost 2 months. During this period, I neither went back nor called anyone at home. So, I want to take advantage of the Mid-Autumn Festival reunion to take you back to my hometown to see your relatives. When she heard Zhang Fenjai's plan to take her back to her hometown, the happiness and nervousness that suddenly emerged in her heart made Solitsi suddenly turn the steering wheel hard, parked the car on the side of the road at the risk, and asked excitedly. Yezi, what did you just say? I plan to take advantage of the Mid-Autumn Festival reunion to take you back to my hometown to meet my eldest, second, and third grandfathers. Zhang Fenjai, who didn't quite understand why Solitsi was so excited, said it again. Yezi, are you sure, Sulitsi asked, still in disbelief. Certainly. After nodding heavily, Zhang Fengjai held Sulitsi's jade hand and explained with expectation in his eyes. First of all, during the time I came to Ningji City, I encountered a lot of confusing things, and I need to ask 3 grandfathers for confirmation. Secondly, we also want them to meet their future grandson-in-law, and then let their grandpa calculate the engagement and wedding dates for us. After all, a magician cannot predict his own destiny, let alone a good day for engagement and marriage. Yeezy, I love you. Not only are they meeting their parents, but they are already thinking about getting engaged and getting married. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's true thoughts and plans, Sulitsi couldn't control her excitement and threw herself into his arms. He could feel that Sulitsi's body was a little hot. According to Chinese medicine's records of physical changes caused by emotions, Zhang Fengjai knew that he had successfully aroused her emotions and quickly suggested, "Sister Lizzie, let's go home quickly." After nodding her face with an instant blush, Sulitsi restarted the sports car and returned to the road, then accelerated back to the apartment in Golden Orchid Courtyard. While Zhang Fengjai was in a state of excitement, he couldn't help but take out his cell phone and send Zhu Zhenjun a text message. The sudden brake of the BMW sports car in front made Zhu Zhenjun think that the jingle he had just made as a joke had caused Sulitsi to misunderstand, leading to the 2 people quarreling on the side of the road. This made him hesitate whether he should go to apologize and persuade them to stop fighting, when the text message reminder sounded on his mobile phone, and he quickly took a look. "Go back to your own home and find your own wife." After seeing the text message sent by Zhang Fengjai, Zhu Zhenjun, who knew that he had guessed wrong, breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, the mischief that suddenly emerged in his heart made him continue to tease with text messages. "Brother, how many times a night?" After seeing the content of the message sent by Zhu Zhenjun, Zhang Fengjai secretly glanced at Sister Suzy and replied secretly, "Once a night, once a night." Boasting. After seeing the content of the text message sent by Zhang Fengjai, Zhu Zhenjun gave a rather disdainful evaluation, sent a contemptuous emoticon package through text message, and immediately accelerated to surpass the BMW sports car. Because of the text chat just now, he remembered He Tongtong, who was still waiting for him in the villa, and he was also interested in going back to fight. After deleting the content of the chat just now, Zhang Fengjai closed his eyes and began to recall some banned books that he secretly read from his great-grandfather when he was a child, and recalled some scenes in the banned books. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yuanqi. Chapter 222. After nearly 40 minutes of speeding, the BMW sports car returned to the Golden Orchid Court smoothly. They took the elevator back to the apartment building with restless expectations, and then couldn't wait to knock on the door and have a hand-to-hand fight to bid farewell to their fledgling life. Sulitsi accidentally found that the door lock of her apartment was pried open. Zhang Fengjai, who also noticed that the door lock was pried open, directly pulled Sulitsi behind him, and immediately mobilized the strength of his steel and iron bones, and then forced the door open and broke in. Then, he unexpectedly saw 4 people sitting on the sofa in the room. A middle-aged man who was about 50 years old, with a burly figure, a fierce look, and a strong bloody aura. A middle-aged woman who was about 40 years old and looked 6 or 7 points similar to Suzayazi. A handsome boy who was about 18 or 19 years old, who was also somewhat similar to Sulitsi, and a beautiful girl with a delicate face, outstanding figure, and long red hair. Sulitsi, who followed him into the room, asked with a gloomy face when she saw the 4 people sitting on the sofa in the living room, "Why are you here?" At the same time, when they saw Sulitsi entering the room, the middle-aged woman and the handsome boy on the sofa suddenly stood up and asked with surprise, "Why are you still alive?" With similar looks and full of gunpowder questions, Zhang Fengjai probably guessed the special relationship between the 4 people who suddenly appeared in the living room and Sulitsi, So he stood behind Sulitsi without saying much and began to observe the faces of the four people carefully. Walking in front of the beautiful girl, Sulitsi gave a sharp look, which scared the beautiful girl to hide behind the handsome boy, which also made the handsome boy stare at her angrily. Ignoring the handsome boy's glare, Sulitsi slowly sat on the sofa, then looked up at the middle-aged couple with complicated faces, and mocked with a slight smile on her lips. "Are you very disappointed to see that I'm still alive? Liz, what are you talking about?" Faced with Sulitsi's sarcasm, the middle-aged woman showed an awkward smile on her face and quickly explained. "You were able to escape from the kidnappers safely. As parents, we are so happy that we can't wait to be disappointed." "Really?" Faced with her mother's explanation, Sulitsi couldn't help but sneer and asked back, and asked with a trace of sadness in her eyes. "If you still have me as your biological daughter in your eyes, then when the kidnappers asked for ransom, why did you try your best to deny our blood relationship? If you still have me as your biological daughter in your eyes, then when I was kidnapped by the kidnappers, you didn't call the police and find a way to rescue me. Why did you take your precious son and pry open the apartment I bought with my own money?" This. Faced with Sulitsi's repeated questioning, the guilty mother suddenly didn't know how to answer. In response, Sulitsi looked at her father with a sad sneer, and scolded him as his face gradually turned pale. "In your eyes, is your daughter just a tool to make money, a dispensable stranger, and a commodity that can be sold by you at any time?" He glanced at the beautiful girl from the corner of his eyes, and found that her eyes were full of surprise and hesitation. When Sue's father suddenly slapped the coffee table and scolded him, he suddenly slapped the coffee table hard. "Dead girl, shut up. Haha, it seems that I guessed your thoughts. You are worried that she will break up with your disappointing baby son." Facing her father's furious scolding, Sulitsi's eyes flashed with a trace of dead despair, and she continued to sneer. "You unfilial son." Sulitsi's sarcasm replaced the surprise and hesitation in the beautiful girl's eyes with horror, and she subconsciously stayed away from the handsome boy. This made Father Su even more furious. He stood up and rushed directly to Sulitsi, then raised his broad palm and slapped her pretty face hard. However, just when Father Su's strong and powerful slap was about to hit Sulitsi's pretty face, Zhang Fengjai appeared in front of the sofa, grabbed his wrist directly, and shouted with a serious face. "Enough. Boy, let go." Father Su's face was instantly gloomy, and while shouting angrily, he tried his best to break free from the wrist that was grabbed, but facing the iron hand like steel, his struggle was in vain. Zhang Fengjai's sudden move scared Mother Su and immediately aroused the violence of the handsome boy. He picked up a vase beside him and smashed it directly on Zhang Fengjai's head. With a gentle push, Father Su was pushed down on the sofa, and then his clenched fist smashed the vase and grabbed the handsome boy's neck. "Asshole, let my son go." When she saw the handsome boy being strangled by Zhang Fengjai, his face flushed due to difficulty breathing, Su's mother rushed over frantically, cursing at the top of her lungs while punching and kicking Zhang Fengjai. When she saw her mother's sharp nails tearing Zhang Fengjai's clothes and trying to continue to grab his tender face, Sulitsi quickly blocked her mother and shouted, "Stop." Then, she turned her head and ordered Zhang Fengjai. "Yezi, let Su Bingqiang go. Sister Litsi, do you know what kind of fate this kid has?" Zhang Fengjai did not release his right hand that was pinching Su Bingqiang's neck because of Sulitsi's order. He reminded him with a serious look. "There is not only an unreconcilable crack in the three palaces of wealth and fortune, which will make this kid mediocre and useless for his whole life, but also the black air that keeps emerging from the crack has made him addicted to eating, drinking, whoring and gambling, and gradually led to the destruction of your family." Hearing Zhang Fengjai's divination about Su Bingqiang's fate, Sulitsi's face changed slightly, and she turned her head to look at her parents. When she found that they were deliberately avoiding her gaze, she suddenly realized and guessed. "I understand. Is it because all the money you have saved over the years has been squandered by this bastard, and you are no longer able to buy a house for the girl in the city, so you cursed me to die in the hands of the kidnappers? In this way, you can occupy this house legally and reasonably, and then use it to give an explanation to the girl, and also let your precious son marry a wife." Faced with Sulitsi's completely correct guess, Sue's father and mother immediately lowered their heads in shame. Sulitsi's sudden enlightenment guess and Sue's father and mother's shameful acquiescence made the beautiful girl, who was already hesitant in her heart, retreat directly to the kitchen door and look at Su Bingqiang, who was being pinched by Zhang Fengjai, without hiding the disgust in her eyes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 223. Golden Orchid Court, in the apartment. No matter how excessive her parents' selfish behavior was, and no matter how serious the injury she suffered, the blood was thicker than water, and the first thought that came to her mind was to turn to the omnipotent Zhang Fengjai for help. Yezi, is there any way to change Bingqiang's fate, so that he can turn over a new leaf and become a new man? Alas! Faced with Sulitsi's request for help, Zhang Fengjai threw Su Bingqiang in front of Su's father, then sighed and shook his head. As the saying goes, it's easy to change a country, but it's hard to change one's nature. Sister Litsi, this kid has been addicted to eating, drinking, whoring and gambling, and the bad habits have penetrated into his bones. He is not a sin that can be changed by Taoism and family affection. If you want him to stop harming your Su family, there are only two ways at present. Either make him disappear from this world completely, or find a way to make him stay in prison for the rest of his life, otherwise. At this point, Zhang Fengjai looked at Su's mother, who was rubbing Su Bingqiang's neck, and Su's father, who was full of doting in his eyes, and warned in a very serious tone. Otherwise, your parents will be angry to death by him sooner or later, and you and your sister will be implicated and dragged into accidents sooner or later. Asshole, shut up. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's vicious curse on Su Bingqiang, Su's mother, who was eager to protect her son, immediately stood up and scolded him, and began to abuse him. You uneducated and vicious boy, did your parents, when they were young? If it was just a simple insult to him, Zhang Fengjai might not care too much about the other party for Sulitsi's sake. But the other party dared to insult his biological parents and curse his grandfather who took care of him. This was a kind of shame that Zhang Fengjai could not bear. His right hand hit the other party's 3 fatal acupoints as fast as lightning, so that the other party could not continue to insult him. He turned around and said to Sulitsi with a gloomy face, "Sister Litsi, this is your family affair. It is not convenient for me to continue to participate, so I will go out for a walk first." Then, he did not give Sulitsi a chance to stay, and walked around the sofa to the door. "Big brother, wait for me." At this time, the beautiful girl standing at the kitchen door hurriedly greeted Su's father, Su's mother, and Sulitsi. "Uncle, aunt, sister, it's getting late, my parents are still waiting for me to eat, I'm leaving first." Then, the beautiful girl didn't give them any chance to stay, and rushed to Zhang Fengjai, then pulled his arm and left the room. "Big brother, that big sister is not suitable to be your girlfriend." After reaching out and pressing the elevator response button, the beautiful girl tilted her neck and looked at Zhang Fengjai's reminder. "Why?" Zhang Fengjai, who was trembling slightly in his heart, hurriedly asked. "2 reasons." Staring at the numbers that kept jumping on the display panel, the beautiful girl thought for a while, then pretended to be calm and said, "The first reason is feeling. Because I feel that the elder sister doesn't love you wholeheartedly enough, doesn't love you passionately enough, and doesn't love you to death. The second reason is reaction. Although I don't know why the elder brother commented on Su Bingqiang in this way, judging from the elder sister's immediate request for help, she should have believed in your judgment just now. In this case, for the sake of the future happiness of uncle and aunt, the elder sister should have stood by your side decisively to stop the aunt's insults, instead of standing by and watching with hesitation in her eyes. This is the real reason why I judged that the elder sister is not suitable to be your girlfriend. After hearing the explanation given by the beautiful girl, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sighed softly, and then stepped into the slowly opened elevator car. In fact, the reason why he stopped participating in Sulizi's housework was the second reason mentioned by the beautiful girl just now. After nearly 2 months of getting along, he had briefly introduced his family situation to Sulizi. He should be very clear that his parents who died in an accident and the 3 grandfathers who raised him were not only the most important relatives in his life, but also the reverse scale that must not be touched. Sue's mother had been insulting her for nearly 2 minutes, and Sulizi had enough time to stop her, but she stood by and watched her mother vent her anger, which made Zhang Fengjai feel a little disappointed, and he also wanted to think calmly. Big brother, do you think my judgment just now makes sense? The beautiful girl who jumped into the elevator right after him looked at Zhang Fengjai with expectation in her eyes. It makes sense, but it's not comprehensive. After pressing the signal button to the first floor, Zhang Fengjai explained with a forced smile. Sister Litzi didn't come out in time to stop my aunt's insults just now, not because she didn't love me enough, but because of the blood relationship, which made it difficult for her to make the final choice in a short time. Tisk. Facing Zhang Fengjai's defense, the beautiful girl snorted with contempt, and said sarcastically with disdain in her eyes. Big brother, when I was in the senior class of kindergarten, I once learned an idiom called self-deception. I think it is too appropriate to describe you at this moment. Little girl, how old are you this year? Do you know what love is? Zhang Fengjai, who was told his inner thoughts by a yellow-haired girl, immediately started to criticize with an unhappy look on his face. Cut. In response to this, the beautiful girl continued to snort contemptuously, and then sarcastically raised her towering breasts. I just called you big brother, and that was a loss of face that I gave you. If we tell each other's true ages, I guess you are probably still the little brother. The beautiful girl's sarcasm immediately aroused Zhang Fengjai's inner dissatisfaction. He raised his head and observed the other person's face, but unexpectedly found that the other person was indeed older than him. He was immediately speechless and didn't know what to retort. Okay, stop being depressed here. Zhang Fengjai's sudden silence made the pretty girl guess that the other party was indeed not as old as herself. This made her feel extremely excited. At the same time, she put her arms around his shoulders and said like a big sister. Sister, now take you to a good place where you can forget all your worries. Perhaps because of his inner suspicion and disappointment towards Sulizi, or perhaps because of the depression that he was not as old as the other party, Zhang Fengjai neither broke away from the other party's arm around his shoulders nor refused the other party's proposal just now, but followed the other party's footsteps and left. After leaving the Golden Orchid Garden in the apartment, I got into a taxi and went straight to a hidden club in the city, the Harem. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 224. Golden Orchid Court, in the apartment. Seeing Zhang Fengjai, who had cursed his son for a bad end, actually leaving the room with his son's girlfriend, Mother Sue's face suddenly darkened and she immediately demanded to Sulizi. Liz, I don't care what your relationship is with that bastard boy. From now on, you are not allowed to see him, let alone let him appear in this house. Because he is not only the sworn enemy of our Su family, but you can never be together. In fact, when faced with her mother's insults, the reason why Sulizi did not stop her was not because her love for Zhang Fengjai was not heartfelt enough, but because she was shocked that her usually gentle and virtuous mother could have such a fierce and arrogant side. At this time, facing Zhang Fengjai who left due to a misunderstanding, she already regretted having just stood by and watched, and planned to go to Zhang Fengjai to explain clearly to avoid the final breakup due to a trivial misunderstanding. At this moment, facing her mother's unreasonable demands, how could she give up the one she finally selected? Therefore, Solitsi, who looked cold for a moment, said in a calm tone, "Mom, since I started working to support myself when I was 12 years old, you have lost the right to interfere in my life and feelings. I am not afraid to tell you the truth now. The young man just now is not only my boyfriend, but we have already reached the stage of discussing marriage, so it is best to take back your request just now." Bending to pick up the bag placed on the sofa, Solitsi turned around and walked towards the door while giving a hard-hearted warning. "In addition, I bought this apartment with my own money, and it is also the dowry for the young man I will marry in the future. It has nothing to do with Su Bingqiang, so I hope you can leave as soon as possible." "Stop." After hearing Solitsi's heartless words, Su's father suddenly stood up and threatened with a livid face. "No matter how many sorry things we have done to you in the past, or how good you are now, there is one thing you can never change, that is, you Solitsi will always be my daughter, Sutingai, and everything you have now they're all your brothers too." Solitsi suddenly stopped, her eyes showing a look of complete despair, and then she warned in a tone as cold as ice. "Dad, I have often reminded you before to read more legal news and newspapers, and don't just think about the business of killing pigs and selling meat. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said anything stupid today. Half an hour. If you haven't left the apartment after half an hour, then don't blame me for calling the police and suing you." After leaving a ruthless warning, Solitsi left the apartment quickly and found out from the doorman where Zhang Fengjai and the beautiful girl went. The harem is a very high-end entertainment club in Ningji City. But what is different from other entertainment clubs is that not only is the reputation of the harem not obvious at all, but its location is extremely remote. Except for some rich people with a net worth of more than 1 million and certain taxi drivers, very few people in Ningji City know about the harem. At least the taxi driver they are taking now does not know the existence and specific location of the harem. The reason why it is so hidden is that the projects operated by the harem are not only illegal and criminal activities, but also businesses that are directly on the surface. As long as it is a surprise inspection by the police, the problem can be found 100% of the time. The beautiful girl can know the existence and specific location of the harem not because she is worth more than 1 million, but because she is a special service member of the harem. However, unlike the special personnel in ordinary clubs, the beautiful girl only works part-time once or twice when she has no money. She is still a sophomore in medical school. Of course, the above information was quietly told to him by the beautiful girl. Under the command of the beautiful girl, the taxi drove into a dilapidated community called Ruyizianggrui, and finally stopped in front of a dilapidated 6-story building. "Give me money," the beautiful girl ordered Zhang Fengjai while pushing the car door open. After paying the fare and getting off the bus, Zhang Fengjai looked up at the dilapidated building in front of him that had begun to peel off its skin, with a solemn look gradually showing in his eyes. Generally, entertainment venues that engage in illegal operations are filled with a lot of resentment, evil spirits, and blood. After all, whether they are people engaged in special services or guests who come to waste money, they are not necessarily willing people. They will definitely have a lot of resentment and thoughts of revenge in their hearts. But in the seemingly dilapidated building in front of him, in addition to a lot of resentment, evil spirit, and blood energy, there were also resentful spirits that could not escape, evil ghosts with deep obsessions, and the Buddha's light that disgusted him. This shows that the owner of the harem is not only a sinner with countless blood on his hands, but also a Buddhist monk behind him who pretends to be compassionate, but is actually full of male thieves and female prostitutes. "By the way, I don't know your name yet." She walked to the storage room in the middle and stretched out her hand to open the iron door. At the same time, the beautiful girl turned to Zhang Fengjai and asked, "My name is Zhang Fengjai." Whether it was the golden light of Buddhism, or the vengeful spirits and evil spirits, Zhang Fengjai was unwilling to come into contact with too much at this stage, so he said his name while bowing and wanted to leave. But the beautiful girl who had already opened the iron door rushed to his side in 3 or 2 steps, directly stretched out her hand to hug his arm, and took him into the storage room with force, while reminding him in a low voice. Zhang Fengjai, whether it is the staff in the harem or the guests who come to consume, basically they will use fake names, so when someone checks their identity later, you will use Feng's fake name. In addition, my fake name is Ting Ting. You are a special service staff who comes to work with me. Don't let me know. Special service staff who works together. When Zhang Fengjai heard Ting Ting's solemn reminder, he suddenly felt a little uneasy and was about to ask, but the wall behind the storage room suddenly opened to both sides, revealing a silver door made of pure steel. Seeing the silver door, Ting Ting reached out and pressed a red button on the door, and the silver door slowly opened, and then 2 burly, fierce-looking, and about 30-year-old strong men walked out. Ting Ting, who is he? One of the strong men with a green snake tattoo on his arm asked, looking at Zhang Fengjai with a scrutinizing look. Fengzi, my classmate, a super strong man in that aspect, can definitely meet the needs of some people. After taking a look at Zhang Fengjai's lower body, Ting Ting boasted with satisfaction on her face. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 225. Ting Ting, are you sure he can do it? Looking at Zhang Fengjai, who was thin and young looking, he didn't look like a strong man who could last long in that aspect. The green snake tattooed man showed a look of doubt in his eyes. Faced with the doubt of the green snake tattooed man, Ting Ting rolled her eyes at him and pretended to be unhappy and responded. Whether it's okay or not, you can find a woman to try it and you'll know. Angry. Whether it's been more than a month since he came into contact with Zhu Zhenjun, or during the time he worked at Yongsheng Group and watched TV series online, he has fully understood the difference between men and women in the special service industry. At this time, he finally knew that the seemingly heroic and chivalrous Ting Ting in front of him was actually an out-and-out human trafficker. However, the objects she trafficked were not children and women, but young men like himself who were not well versed in the world. At this moment, he finally knew why there were vengeful spirits and evil spirits in the dilapidated building in front of him. I'm afraid that those young men and women who were deceived into the harem were transformed after they died unwillingly. After pulling out the arm that Ting Ting was holding tightly, Zhang Fengjai turned around and left the storage room, intending to use Taoism to completely destroy the sinful place full of resentment, evil spirits, and blood in front of him. At the same time, release the resentful spirits and evil ghosts trapped by the Buddhist spells, and let them take revenge for being abducted and sold. When she saw Zhang Fengjai turning around and planning to leave the storage room, Ting Ting, with a cold light in her eyes, spread her hands to the 2 strong men and reminded them helplessly. It's bad, he found out. While signaling his accomplices to quickly intercept Zhang Fengjai, the strong man with the green snake tattoo further confirmed. Ting Ting, are you sure this kid is really strong in that aspect? Brother Yang, don't you still believe in your sister? After throwing a seductive wink to the other party, Ting Ting deliberately pretended to be sad and complained. Forget it. Facing Ting Ting's flirting, the sturdy man with the green snake tattoo suddenly felt a heat in his lower abdomen, and then he took the initiative to help the other party relieve the worries of the future. Even if he is not strong in that aspect, we have all kinds of magic medicines to make him a super strong man. The only side effect is that he will not live long. Brother Yang, I will go to your room after get off work today. Ting Ting, with a glimpse of joy in her eyes, also quickly showed her sincerity, which made the sturdy man with the green snake tattoo even happier and more excited. Ah! Just as the sturdy man with the green snake tattoo and Ting Ting were flirting with each other, a miserable howl suddenly sounded in the storage room, which immediately attracted their attention. Looking up quickly, they found that the sturdy man who had just intercepted Zhang Fengjai had his arms twisted into a knot and fell to the ground. and the thin Zhang Fengjai continued to walk out of the storage room without any injury. Damn it! Seeing his companion who was completely disabled, the sturdy man with the green snake tattoo cursed secretly and rushed towards Zhang Fengjai at an accelerated speed. But when he was less than 1 meter away from Zhang Fengjai suddenly turned around and kicked out a whirlwind kick, directly kicking the strong man with the green snake tattoo away, and then slamming heavily on the silver-white door. Puff. Then, the strong man with the green snake tattoo spit out a large mouthful of blood, and his head tilted and he fainted. Ting Ting, who was constantly retreating, showed a look of fear in her eyes. Because she didn't expect that Zhang Fengjai, who was thin, would be so strong and sharp. Shameless woman, today I will use the bloody reality to tell you that there are some people you can't afford to offend, and at the same time, the consequences of offending you are also unbearable. Looking at Ting Ting, whose face was instantly as pale as paper and leaning against the silver-white iron door, Zhang Fengjai threatened with murderous intent, then turned around and left the storage room and stood in front of the building. Then, he took out 4 soul-suppressing talismans and 4 killing talismans from his sleeves, used his spiritual power to drive the talismans into burning flames, and threw them directly to all directions of the 6-story building. Then, he pinched his fingers and chanted a spell to drive the talisman flames. The 3 pure ones show their magical powers, and the heavenly fire descends to destroy the evil spirits. Along with Zhang Fengjai's spell, the burning flames of the 4 soul-suppressing talismans fell directly on the building and began to burn the Buddhist spells that trapped the resentful spirits and evil spirits in the building. As the Buddhist spells hidden on the walls and door frames in the building were burned, the resentful spirits and evil spirits that were trapped immediately roared in a low voice. However, they did not take the opportunity to escape. Instead, they took advantage of the opportunity to escape and rushed to various rooms in the building with their fangs and claws, and then attacked those guests and service staff who were enjoying special services, or attacked the gamblers and dealers who were shouting desperately at the gambling table, or attacked the ice guests and girls who were taking drugs in the box, or attacked the thugs and killers who created them. Suddenly, the whole building was filled with screams of fear and pain. However, the specially renovated building had a strong soundproofing effect, and the screams did not alarm the residents around. Please Buddha. Just as the whole building was in complete chaos due to the revenge of the vengeful spirits and evil spirits, a roar of suppressed anger suddenly sounded in the room in the middle of the 6th floor. Then, countless faint golden Buddha lights emanated from the room where the sound was heard. Next, no matter whether it was an invisible vengeful spirit or an evil spirit that appeared with the help of vengeance and evil spirits, as long as they were swept by the faint golden Buddha light, they all turned into a puff of white gas and disappeared. This also made the remaining vengeful spirits and evil spirits abandon their prey and flee from the building that brought them fatal danger in panic. The vengeful spirits and evil spirits that escaped were a means for him to vent his anger. How could Zhang Fengjai tolerate their destruction and escape? While his 10 fingers quickly condensed the seal, he shouted at the one who took a step forward. The 3 pure ones showed their magical powers, killing Buddhas, destroying demons, and shaking the balance of heaven. Along with the roaring incantation, the flames of the 4 heart-piercing talismans that had been floating above the building immediately condensed into 4 short and exquisite fire swords that stabbed at the golden Buddha light. The Buddha light that could easily destroy vengeful spirits and evil spirits, when facing the fire sword condensed by the talisman flame, was like a flame encountering a flood and retreating step by step. Bold sinner, dare to violate the Dharma and offend the Buddha's power. Just as the fire sword condensed by the flames continued to force back the golden Buddha light, a strong and domineering shout suddenly sounded from the room. With a domineering shout, 2 huge golden Buddha palms smashed the windows on both sides of the room, and then quickly grabbed the 4 approaching fire swords. The sky and the earth are boundless, Kyenkan swordsmanship. Seeing the 2 golden Buddha hands extending from the room, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a frightening cold light, and he immediately mobilized the spiritual power of Danshan to condense 2 sharp swords, and then threw them into the air while pinching his hands and chanting a spell. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuchi. Chapter 226. Taoist Monk. When he saw two sharp swords that were as fast as the wind, constantly piercing the flaws in the Buddha's palm, causing the power of the Buddha's palm to weaken and gradually become illusory, a deep and solemn voice came from the room. Then, the Buddha's palm, which was about to collapse, quickly retracted into the room, and then an even more dazzling golden Buddha light erupted from the room. Accompanied by the dazzling golden Buddha light, a bald shadow about 3 feet tall, wearing a cassock, with a kind expression, a smile on his face, sitting cross-legged with his knees bent, and his eyes closed, appeared out of thin air above the building. At this time, the time was close to 8 o'clock in the evening, and night had officially enveloped the earth. At this moment, the bald shadow appeared above the building out of thin air, just like the sun emitting dazzling light in the darkness. It not only attracted the attention of the residents of the entire community, but also alarmed the attention of many caring people in Ningji City. Sulitsi, who was driving a BMW sports car, was walking through a secluded and warm street, her eyes scanning the dimly lit foot massage parlors and leisure shops around her from time to time, looking for the word harem she heard from the apartment security guard. But until the sports car drove away from the end of Wenking Street, no clues about the harem were found. Just when she was about to head to the bustling Taipei Road to continue looking for the harem, a Buddha floating in mid-air suddenly appeared in the rear-view mirror, exuding dazzling golden light. When Sulitsi looked at the majestic and kind phantom of the Lord Buddha, she was very surprised. At the same time, she immediately turned the steering wheel without any hesitation, and then accelerated towards the Ruyi community where the phantom of the Lord Buddha was located. Because she had a very strong feeling in her heart that the reason why Lord Buddha's shadow appeared was probably related to Zhang Fenjai, whom she was looking for so hard. In the teacher's apartment of Ningji Normal University, Zhuang Jian, who had just sent Mr. Chiu away and returned to the apartment, was leaning on the windowsill and looking into the distance, with envy and regret flashing in her eyes from time to time. Because on the way to the Guanghe Huafa Villa area, Mr. Chiu briefly explained to her why he was eager to see Zhang Fenjai. Since ancient times, good and evil have not existed at all. If a monk from an orthodox Taoist sect faces a ghost that uses resentment and evil spirits to attack the realm of the beast ghost, he will neither consider resolving the other party's inner resentment, nor will he use peaceful negotiations to make the other party give up the idea of revenge and go into seclusion. Instead, we should immediately take action to slay the demons to eliminate their future troubles, and use this to accumulate merit and improve our mental state. However, Zhang Fenjai completely went against the practices of the orthodox monks of the Taoist sect and tried his best to protect the ghosts who had advanced to the realm of wild ghosts. This made Mr. Chiu suspect that he might be a casual cultivator inherited from his family. This is because only casual cultivators with no sect and no sect, who have no distinction between good and evil in their inherited consciousness, and who do not need to rely on the accumulation of merit to improve their mental state, are able to negotiate with ghosts. Zhang Fenjai, who is only 18 years old, has already reached the stage of spiritual transformation. At the same time, he is a casual cultivator without any sect restraint or influence. This is exactly what the Supernatural Research Institute has been trying to attract. Moreover, according to Mr. Chiu's evaluation of Zhang Fenjai's temperament, moral character, talent, and strength, if he can become a member of the Supernatural Research Institute, he will not only immediately receive the treatment of a top core genius, but also get the position and power of the lowest major rank. This is why Zhuang Jian feels envious. After all, as the person in charge of dealing with supernatural phenomena in Ningji City and a direct disciple of the Supernatural Research Institute, she now only enjoys the position and power of the rank of captain. but it is a pity that Zhang Fenjai's temporary departure from Ningji City and Qiu Lao's immediate return to the imperial capital caused him to lose the opportunity to be won over by Qiu Lao himself. This is why Zhuang Jian feels regretful. After all, Qiu Lao is not only a top expert in the foundation building stage, but also a senior executive of the Supernatural Research Institute, who can give many unexpected benefits and promises on the spot. This is the projection of the Buddhist Buddha. Just when Zhuang Jian truly felt sorry for Zhang Fenjai, the phantom of the Buddha suddenly appeared above Ruyi Xiangrui community, which immediately caught her attention. When she turned sideways and took a closer look at the bald figure emitting dazzling golden Buddha light, she couldn't help shouting out the person's origin with a sudden expression on her face. She immediately turned around and left the room. At the same time, she quickly took out her mobile phone to contact the armed police and public security, asking them to set up a warning immediately. The line is closed to prevent ordinary people from approaching. At a tea house about 5 miles away from the abandoned fertilizer factory, the cultivator surnamed Wu, who was meditating with his knees bent, was also alarmed by the phantom of the Buddha appearing in the sky above Ruyi Jixian community. It's just as I expected. The evil cultivator surnamed Wu appeared on the roof of the tea house. Looking at the bald figure emitting dazzling golden Buddha light, he said to himself solemnly. The operator behind the harem was indeed protected by the Buddhist sect and was given the true body of a clay statue projected by a powerful person in the Buddha realm. It's just that. Immediately afterwards, the evil cultivator named Wu frowned slightly and asked himself. In the entire Ningji city, apart from me, the only phantoms of Buddha that can force the harem operators to use the real body of the clay statues are the black-skinned widow from the Supernatural Research Institute, the evil cultivator smiling old man from Miaoying village, and the evil cultivator from the medical school. Young Master Xiu Qiandao, the blind soul-severing casual cultivator from Xianying village, the sweeping security guard at the talent building, and the monster Black Bat King from the agricultural school. But there is no deep hatred or conflict of interest between them and the Buddhist forces. Why did they suddenly attack the harem? Wrong. The frown suddenly relaxed, and a flash of light flashed in Wu Zixiu's eyes. There is another talented and reckless young man in Ningji City. Guessing this, the evil cultivator surnamed Wu immediately waved the sleeves of his Taoist robe and threw out 5 poisonous creatures, and then excitedly ordered them. You should immediately go to the place where the Buddha's phantom is, and then lurk around and wait for an opportunity. If the Buddha's phantom wins in the end, you should come back immediately. If the Buddha's phantom is defeated and destroyed in the end, you should immediately sneak into the harem to devour the blood and evil spirits, and do your best to improve your own strength. After hearing the order of the evil cultivator surnamed Wu, the 5 poisonous creatures roared in a low voice, and then crawled, jumped, or ran to the Ruyi Xiangrui community. Bang! Seeing the sharp sword piercing his forehead, the smiling Buddha's phantom quickly raised his Buddha's hand, and then flicked his fingers lightly to directly bounce the sharp sword away. The sky and the earth are boundless, Qiankan sword technique. After reaching out to grasp the rebounded sword, Zhang Fenjai threw the sword again, and at the same time, he drew a circle in the air in front of him with his right hand. Then, the sword that quickly stabbed at the Buddha's phantom suddenly increased its speed by 3 times to avoid the Buddha's fingers and directly wiped the Buddha's phantom's neck. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 227. Buddha has mercy on me. After a light sigh, the Buddha's phantom quickly rose up, and the golden cassock on his body just blocked the attack of the sharp sword. Then, after dodging the fatal sword attack, his neck quickly broke away from the golden cassock of the Buddha's phantom, and began to entangle and wrap the sharp sword condensed with spiritual power. This made Zhang Fenjai's face suddenly change, and he immediately formed a seal with his 10 fingers to retract the sharp sword. Because the sharp sword is not only condensed from the spiritual power of the Danshan, but also contains a trace of spiritual thoughts in the sword. If the sharp sword is damaged, Not only will it lose nearly 1/5 of the Danshan's spiritual power, but the soul will also suffer a certain amount of trauma, which will affect the performance of strength and will not be conducive to the subsequent fight with the Buddha's phantom. But the result of recalling the sharp sword with all his strength was to return in vain. Because the golden cassock was like a silk web spit out by a spider, it was so tightly entangled with the sharp sword that it could not be broken free. Faced with the situation where he could not use his mind and spell to retract the sword, Zhang Fengjai could only take the risk of close combat. He took a deep breath, mobilized the spiritual power in his danshan to reduce the weight of his body, and at the same time, he tried his best to increase the strength of his feet and legs, and then suddenly kicked the ground and soared into the sky. When the height of the soaring reached 14 meters, he continued to soar to a height of 9 meters with the help of the protruding balcony on the 4th floor. Finally, at the moment of reaching the top of the building, the spiritual power combined with the physical strength of his legs made him fly directly into the air like a cannonball, rushing towards the cassock that was tightly entangled with the sword. Yezi Sulitsi, who was blocked outside the cordon, could only stare at the Buddha's phantom in the air, looking forward to seeing Zhang Fengjai's figure. So, at the moment when Zhang Fengjai soared into the sky, Sulitsi, who saw his figure, hurriedly shouted loudly, which immediately attracted the attention of Zhuang Jian, who arrived at Ruyijixiang community one step ahead. She waved to the armed police in charge of the cordon, signaling him to let Sulitsi enter the community, and she took the initiative to greet him. Little friend Zhang. Yanguo's Hung, who received the blockade order, accelerated the police car and just arrived at Rishizianggrui community. When he opened the door and was about to get out of the car, he unexpectedly saw Zhang Fengjai soaring into the sky, and his face changed. Then, he took out the pistol from his waist and checked it. After confirming that there was enough ammunition, he successfully passed the cordon and entered Ruyizianggrui community with his newly promoted status as deputy director, and then began to look for the best position for shooting. Seeing Zhang Fengjai soaring into the sky, the Buddha's phantom raised his mouth slightly and stretched out his Buddha's hand, and then slapped Zhang Fengjai fiercely with a move of the Buddha's palm. In response, Zhang Fengjai, who had been mentally prepared for a long time, immediately mobilized the strength of his steel-bone body, and then cooperated with the spiritual power of Danshan, intending to fight the Buddha's palm that the Buddha's phantom slapped. Buddha is still a strong man in the foundation building stage. The Buddha's phantom is a projection condensed from the real body of the clay statue. It has nearly 1/10 of the Buddha's own strength and barely reaches the realm of the early 8th level of the Qi condensation stage. Whether it is fighting with Gu Xing of the Gukang sect or facing Zhang Huijing in the Yaogui realm, his own cultivation and strength, as well as his state of mind and vision have been greatly improved. Although his current cultivation is only at the peak of the 7th level of the Qi condensation stage, he can fully exert the strength of the 8th level of the Qi condensation stage with all his strength and the strength of his steel-like body. Of course, compared with the Buddha's phantom, his only disadvantage now is that he cannot master the means of flying in the air. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening roar, the Buddha's phantom's palm was directly smashed by Zhang Fengjai, and instantly appeared in front of the golden cassock. With the help of less than 1 second of air time, he stretched out his hands to grab the two corners of the cassock, and then suddenly pulled it hard. Swish! Accompanied by a sharp tearing sound, the golden cassock was torn into 2 halves, and the 1 second airborne time had passed, causing Zhang Fengjai to fall like a meteor. Yezi. Seeing Zhang Fengjai falling like a meteor, Sulitsi couldn't help but scream out loud, and her face turned pale as paper, with a look of regret in her eyes. If she had stopped her mother's insults in time, Zhang Fengjai would not have left the apartment. If Zhang Fengjai had not left the apartment, he would not have been impulsive with the Buddha's phantom in front of him, and there would be no fatal accident. Zhang Fengjai. Zhang Xiao. Zhuang Jian, who was standing next to Sulitsi, and Yanguo's Hung, who was hiding in the corner of the carport and preparing to shoot, also had a sudden change of face and screamed out loud, and closed their eyes unable to bear the miserable scene. The sky and the earth are boundless, the spirit sword protects me. Just when he fell to the top of the building, Zhang Fengjai barely used the remaining 10% of his spirit power to stabilize his body, and immediately shouted with his 10 fingers in a seal. Then, the sharp sword that successfully escaped from the entanglement and wrapping of the golden cassock rushed down at a gust of wind, and appeared at his feet in time when Zhang Fengjai fell to the 5th floor. He stepped hard on the sharp sword with his right foot, and instantly got rid of the fall, and his body flew up again and landed on the roof. Great! When they saw Zhang Fengjai appear on the top of the building after escaping danger, Sulitsi, Zhuangjian and Yang Hung couldn't help but cheer, but the smile on the face of an old man in plain clothes outside the cordon was instantly put away, and a terrifying cold light flashed in his eyes. After landing steadily on the top floor of the building, Zhang Fengjai quickly used his mind to call back the sharp sword, and then used his strength to force the Buddha's phantom in the air, and immediately made a seal with his 10 fingers and shouted. The sky and the earth are boundless, the primordial law is righteous, the mind is indestructible, and it changes in 1,000 ways. Accompanied by Zhang Fengjai's shouting and chanting, the sharp sword thrown at the Buddha's phantom began to split into new swords while the sword body vibrated rapidly. 2 sharp swords. 4 sharp swords. 8 sharp swords. In the end, the number of sharp swords stabbing at the Buddha's phantom reached 16. This is. Looking at the 16 sharp swords scattered in all directions, instantly covering all of its vital points and flaws, the Buddha's phantom looked solemn, and a look of thought flashed in his eyes. Because the sharp sword-splitting sword method that Zhang Fengjai had just performed gave him a familiar impression, as if he had seen it there before. However, the 16 sharp swords that attacked as fast as the wind did not allow him to continue to recall. The Buddha said, "Everything is illusory." While closing his eyes quickly, he placed his remaining left hand on his chest and chanted a Buddhist sutra. Then, a brighter and richer Buddha light emerged from his body, and the Buddha light quickly formed one Buddha seal after another. Finally, the Buddha seals condensed by the rich Buddha light reached 16, and then they met the 16 sharp swords that were stabbing at him quickly. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun. Chapter 228. Swastika. Looking up at the 16 Buddhist seals condensed by the dense Buddha light, Zhang Fengjai's expression gradually became solemn, and a hint of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Because when his third grandfather taught him the sword method of Tiandiwuji, he had specifically mentioned several spells that could restrain the sword-breaking technique. Among them, the third one was the Buddha seal in Buddhism, which had the ability to break the virtual and cut the real. At the same time, in order to help the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power escape, he had just consumed too much spiritual power and physical strength. If even the sword-breaking technique could not deal with the Buddha's phantom, then he should consider how to escape safely next. The Buddha said, "Life is death, death is life, virtual is real, and real is virtual." The Buddha's phantom opened his eyes again, showing a peaceful smile of compassion on his face, and continued to recite the Dharma as loud as a bell. Afterwards, the 16 Buddha seals that took the initiative to meet the sharp swords quickly grew larger, successfully resisting the sharp sword's sharp attacks, and the enlarged Buddha seals quickly softened. Then, the Buddha seals, like the golden cassock just now, began to wrap around and envelop the 16 sharp swords split by the sword-breaking technique. The sky and the earth are boundless, and the universe is overturned. Seeing the 16 sharp swords trapped by the Buddha seals again, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a resolute ruthlessness, and his mind immediately coordinated with the magic formula to control the 16 sharp swords to self-destruct, and then prepared to admit defeat and flee the harem. Bang! But just when the magic formula controlling the sharp swords was about to condense the mark of self-destruction, a deafening gunshot suddenly rang in his ears. Along with the deafening gunshot, Zhang Fengjai saw a high-speed rotating bullet in the carport 20 meters away, at the speed of a gust of wind, directly shot at the Buddha's phantom in the air. Damn it! Even Zhang Fengjai could see the trajectory and power of the rotating bullet, not to mention the Buddha's shadow, who had stronger cultivation and strength. However, at this time, he was fully controlling the Buddha's seal to wrap the sword, and he could not spare any energy to deal with the bullet. At the same time, the Buddha shadow, condensed by the mud statue's true body, only had the strength of the 8th level of the condensation stage, and did not have the defense to directly resist the bullet shooting. At this moment, facing the high-speed shooting bullets, he had only two choices. Either give up the Buddha seal's wrapping of the 16 swords and spare energy to deal with the bullets. But the result would give Zhang Fengjai the opportunity to continue to use the sword to attack, and eventually cause the Buddha's shadow to suffer a fatal blow. Or, continue to use the Buddha seal's wrapping method to destroy the sword and bear the bullet shooting. But the final result is likely to be the destruction of the mud statue's true body, causing the Buddha's shadow to completely disappear. However, the urgent reality of the fatal crisis did not give the Buddha's shadow too much time to think. In order to protect the safety of the harem operator so that he could rebuild an identical harem in a short time, he finally chose to withstand the bullets and destroy the sword, which could severely damage Zhang Fengjai's soul. The Buddha said, "Nothing exists." When the bullet hit the center of the Buddha's shadow, he directly used the Dharma to detonate 16 Buddha seals, and with the destructive power formed by the self-explosion of the Buddha seal, he instantly destroyed the 16 swords. Boom! Puff, puff. Accompanied by continuous roars, Zhang Fengjai, who was standing on the roof, spit out 2 mouthfuls of blood with a painful look on his face. Then, the feeling of powerlessness and weakness that suddenly hit his body made him fall directly on the hard cement. Fortunately, he guessed in advance the Buddha's shadow's final choice of destroying both jade and stone, and before the Buddha seal self-exploded and destroyed the 16 swords, he cut off the thought induction with the swords in advance. Although the soul also suffered some damage, it was far less serious than what the Buddha's phantom expected, and it could be completely restored through the planned healing. Just as Zhang Fengjai fell on the concrete floor of the roof, the old man in plain clothes standing outside the cordon had a flash of joy in his eyes, and a thin black filament appeared in his hand. Then, the black filament flew to the roof as fast as the wind, aiming directly at Zhang Fengjai's heart. However, what was completely unexpected to the old man in plain clothes was that at the moment when the black filament just reached the roof, Zhuang Jian took advantage of the advance action and appeared beside Zhang Fengjai 1 step ahead, which instantly replaced the joy in his eyes with hesitation. Although the power of the black filament could easily kill Zhuang Jian, the Supernatural Research Institute behind Zhuang Jian was a terrorist force that he could not afford to provoke at this stage. Finally, after careful consideration, the old man in plain clothes quickly retracted the black filament and turned around and left the scene quickly. However, what the old man in plain clothes did not notice was that Zhang Fengjai, who was helped up by Zhuang Jian, not only noticed him, but also flashed a frightening cold light in his eyes. "Zhang Fengjai, what's wrong with you?" After noticing the cold light flashing in Zhang Fengjai's eyes, Zhuang Jian immediately asked nervously. "It's okay." After shaking his head to indicate that he was fine, Zhang Fengjai smiled and thanked Zhuang Jian. "Teacher Zhuang, thank you." "Zhang Fengjai, there is no need for you and me to be so polite." After shaking his head in the same way, Zhuang Jian glanced at Yang Guo's Hung, who was escorted away by 6 criminal police officers, and secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and helped Zhang Fengjai walk towards the stairs leading to the building. "It seems that there are many people who want to take advantage." Zhang Fengjai, who came to the 6th floor along the stairs, suddenly turned his head to look at a black shadow flashing in the corner, and said to himself with a sneer in his eyes, "Who is it?" Although she was a step late to pay attention and did not see the black shadow flashing in the corner, as a cultivator of spiritual power, she could still sense a faint trace of demonic energy left in the corner. "The green bamboo snake, the leader of the 5 poisons," Zhang Fengjai explained without hiding anything. The owner of the Qingjing Wubai tea house, the poisonous Taoist Wu Qinghao, who is proficient in poison. When Zhang Fenjai mentioned the green bamboo snake, the leader of the 5 poisons, Zhuang Jian's face showed a solemn look. When he heard Zhuang Jian point out the origin of the evil cultivator who had fought with him twice, Zhang Fenjai's eyes showed a thoughtful look. In fact, if you think about it carefully, the grudge between him and the poisonous Taoist Wu Qinghao was mainly caused by himself. If he hadn't secretly stolen the 5 elements spirit pearl that the other party had cultivated with great difficulty, the first conflict between them would not have occurred. If he hadn't placed the talisman on Chen Xiaofeng and actively provoked the dispute, the second conflict between them would not have occurred. Moreover, even after losing the precious 5 elements spirit pearl, even in the face of his own provocation, Wu Qinghao always chose to endure and did not retaliate immediately. This shows that the other party is a smart person who acts cautiously and is good at protecting himself, which suddenly made Zhang Fenjai want to visit him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 229. Zhang Fenjai suddenly had an impulse and thought to visit Wu Qinghao, who was good at keeping himself safe. Firstly, a smart person like Wu Qinghao would definitely investigate all the supernatural masters in Ningji City carefully to avoid offending some masters who should not be provoked in order to ensure that he could survive well. Moreover, with the strength of the other party at the peak of the 9th level of the Qi condensation stage, the information he investigated would definitely exceed that of Zhuang Jian. Therefore, he wanted to take the opportunity to return the 5 elements spirit pearl to ask the other party about the origins of the old man in plain clothes and the stone lions on the stone bridge, so as to make a perfect revenge plan. Secondly, if the physical body grade that has reached the peak of the small success realm wants to be successfully promoted to the great success realm, in addition to some necessary precious medicinal materials, it is also necessary to stimulate the hidden potential of the physical body. In the economic market after the reform and opening up, as long as there is money, any precious medicinal materials can be collected with money, but the means to stimulate the potential of the physical body cannot be obtained with money. The 5 poisonous creatures that Wu Qinghao carefully cultivated contained extremely poisonous life essence blood, which was the top treasure to stimulate the potential of the body. Therefore, he wanted to exchange 5 drops of life essence blood of the 5 poisonous creatures by means of barter. It was precisely because he had the idea of visiting in his heart that Zhang Fenjai finally chose to turn a blind eye to the 5 poisonous creatures that devoured the rich blood and evil spirit in the building. Chief. He went up the stairs to the 4th floor and happened to meet a dozen armed police who rushed up. When they saw Zhuang Jian, who was supporting Zhang Fenjai, they immediately saluted and greeted her with their chests raised. Keep going, and don't let any criminal go, Zhuang Jian ordered with a serious look. The person in charge of a mere Ningji city can mobilize the armed forces representing the country at will, which made Zhang Fenjai truly see the terrifying ability of the Supernatural Research Institute, and a trace of envy flashed in his eyes. After all, the experience in the secular world, with an official background, can avoid a lot of unnecessary troubles. Zhang Fenjai, are you interested in becoming a member of the Supernatural Research Institute? Zhuang Jian noticed the envy in Zhang Fenjai's eyes and was filled with joy, so she quickly extended an olive branch. In response, Zhang Fenjai just smiled and shook his head to refuse. As the saying goes, once you enter the Marquis's house, it's like entering the sea, and you will lose your freedom from then on. After leaving the Shushan family and entering the secular world, in addition to finding a lover to accompany you for life, the main thing is to improve your state of mind and Taoist cultivation through the experience of the world, and accumulate enough wealth to ensure a peaceful life in the countryside in the future. If you become a member of the Supernatural Research Institute, you will not only lose your original intention of experiencing the world, but also ruin your peaceful life in the countryside. How could he agree to such a thing that completely goes against his original intention? Seeing Zhang Fengjai shaking his head and refusing without hesitation, Zhuang Jian's eyes flashed with disappointment, but she did not continue to persuade him in a hurry. Because she believed that as Zhang Fengjai continued to gain a deeper understanding of the power and treatment of the Supernatural Research Institute, and his desire and plan to benefit the people, he would eventually join the Supernatural Research Institute willingly and become a comrade in arms fighting side by side with her. Yezi. With Zhuang Jian's prior instructions, Sulitzi, who was not blocked by any means, did not appear in front of Zhang Fengjai until he went down the stairs to the second floor because of her high heels. After seeing Zhang Fengjai being supported by the sexy and enchanting Zhuang Jian, and two peaks that were not inferior to hers constantly touching Zhang Fengjai's arms, Sulitzi's eyes flashed with a trace of vigilance, and she hurried forward to replace Zhuang Jian. In response, Zhuang Jian just chuckled and stepped back a few steps, not caring about Sulitzi's vigilance and precautions at all. Because she knew very well that Zhang Fengjai, who had the top talent for cultivation, had no future with Sulitzi, an ordinary person. The gap in identity and status, the change in lifespan and appearance, would sooner or later make Sulitzi give up on her own initiative. Yezi, I'm sorry. Stretching out her jade hand to support Zhang Fengjai's arm, Sulitzi apologized softly with self-blame. Sister Litzi, it's okay. I know the constraints and influence of family affection on you, and I can understand what you did at that time. Zhang Fengjai gently patted Sulitzi's jade hand and smiled to comfort her. In fact, on the way to the harem, he accidentally heard the taxi driver calling his daughter who was alone at home, telling her about every bit of life and study. From the doting eyes and caring tone of the taxi driver, he could feel the greatness of fatherly love and witness the selflessness of family affection, and also understood why Sulitzi remained silent when he was insulted by Su's mother. Yezi, let's go to the hotel. Zhang Fengjai's considerate behavior made Sulitzi feel more guilty, and she also wanted to compensate him in other ways. And the forced interruption of the hand-to-hand fight is probably the only best compensation she can take out now. At the same time, she also secretly decided to use the skills she saw in Japanese movies during college to make Zhang Fengjai remember their first time forever. Okay. The consumption of spiritual power and the slight injury to the soul had no effect on that ability. Zhang Fengjai, who had been looking forward to it for a long time, nodded excitedly in agreement. However, when he saw Tingting who was receiving treatment at the specially modified silver door, Zhang Fengjai suddenly stopped and ordered. You all retreat. It is the bounden duty of doctors and nurses to save lives and heal the wounded, so they did not pay any attention to Zhang Fengjai's orders. Until Zhuang Jian personally came forward and ordered several armed police officers to forcibly drive the medical staff out of the storage room. Tingting, I have warned you just now that there are some people in this world that you cannot afford to offend, and you cannot afford the consequences of offending them. Instructing Sulitzi to help her walk to Tingting, whose face was as pale as paper and with a look of fear in her eyes, Zhang Fengjai raised the corners of her mouth slightly and reminded her in a tone as cold as ice. Now, the harem has been completely destroyed by me. I think the harem owner who has escaped early will definitely entertain him well when he learns that the business he worked so hard to run was destroyed because of your bold actions. You. Zhang Fengjai's malicious reminder made Tingting immediately think of the boss behind the harem who was known as the poisonous snake. When the frightened look in her eyes was instantly replaced by fear, her delicate body couldn't help but tremble. Teacher Chuang, she neither needs medical treatment nor police protection. Let her perish on her own. Tingting's frightened and trembling look made Zhang Fengjai dissipate a lot of the anger he had accumulated in his heart, but the shame that emerged in his heart when he thought that the other party actually wanted to sell her to the harem to serve as a special waiter made him unable to let go and plan to continue punishing the other party. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 230. Faced with Zhang Fengjai's order, Zhuang Jian ignored the pitiful Ting Ting and nodded in agreement. No problem. I will give the order. Because the cultivators with supernatural powers are the gods who are high above in the eyes of ordinary people, the dignity of gods cannot be blasphemed and trampled by ordinary people at will. Therefore, even if Zhang Fengjai did not give the order, she would never let Ting Ting off easily. Solitsi, who was reluctant, wanted to plead for Ting Ting, but she thought of the tenderness that was about to begin between them and did not want to destroy Zhang Fengjai's joy at the moment, so she finally chose to remain silent. After stepping out of the storage room, Zhang Fengjai turned his head to look at the carport 20 meters away, but did not see Yang Guozheng, who had just helped in time, and could not help but turn his head to ask Zhuang Jian. Teacher Zhuang, where is Captain Yang? Captain Yang first asked in confusion, and then a look of enlightenment flashed in his eyes. Zhuang Jian hurriedly asked. Zhang Fengjai, are you asking about Yang Guozheng, the former captain of the criminal police team 2, who was just promoted to the position of deputy director? Yes, Zhang Fengjai nodded to confirm. After getting Zhang Fengjai's confirmation, Zhuang Jian glanced at Solitsi, who was hugging Zhang Fengjai's arm tightly, and then walked to his side and whispered in his ear to explain. Director Yang's risky ambush of the Buddha's phantom just now is likely to cause retaliation from the Buddhist forces. In order to avoid his identity being exposed and retaliated, I have arranged for someone to escort him back to the police station quietly in advance, and created the illusion that he was not at the scene, hoping to help him cover up the past temporarily. Teacher Zhuang, thank you. After hearing Zhuang Jian's explanation, Zhang Fengjai felt scared for Yang Guozheng, and also felt sincere admiration and gratitude for Zhuang Jian's aftermath at the critical moment. Zhang Fengjai, since Director Yang is an elite in the system, he is also a colleague of our Supernatural Research Institute. It is our duty to protect his safety, so you don't need to thank me. Zhuang Jian further explained the benefits of joining the Supernatural Research Institute through selfless actions without seeking credit, and continued to tempt Zhang Fengjai. In response, Zhang Fengjai could only continue to pretend to be deaf and dumb and choose to ignore it, and quickened his pace to leave Ruyi Xianggrui community. However, just when he arrived at the gate of the community, more than 100 silver-haired elderly people, led by a bald monk in his 40s, surrounded him and scolded him. Ignorant boy, the Buddha came out to save the people from suffering. Why did you do such a treasonous thing as killing the Buddha? Damn boy, you dared to hurt the compassionate Buddha, you will go to hell sooner or later. You are a bastard with a wolf's heart and a dog's lungs. Why did you hurt the compassionate Buddha and make us lose the opportunity to meet the Buddha? You are worse than pigs and dogs. Shut up. Hearing the insults from the silver-haired old people around, Zhuang Jian, who knew the cause and effect, suddenly stood up and shouted and refuted loudly. Do you know what the compassionate Buddha you think came out for? Pointing at the criminals who were constantly being escorted into the police car by the police and armed police, as well as many beautiful women in cold clothes, Zhuang Jian said angrily. Building number 9 in Ruyi Xianggrui community is a clubhouse that was illegally renovated. All the projects operated in the clubhouse are gambling, drug abuse, human trafficking and pornography, which are not allowed and targeted by national laws. The Buddha you worship is the umbrella behind this clubhouse. The young man you accuse is the hero who destroyed this clubhouse. You ignorant woman, don't insult the Buddha with blood. Hearing Zhuang Jian's slander against the Buddha's phantom, the bald monk with a sudden change of expression immediately jumped out and rebuked and refuted. Buddha is merciful, how could he do such a cruel thing? In my opinion, this guy is probably the boss behind the club. Buddha was born to slay demons and eliminate evil, and to restore the peace and tranquility of this world. Amitabha. More than 100 silver-haired old people at the scene were already full of doubts about Zhuang Jian's revelations. The bald monk's rebuttal of black and white immediately gave them an excuse to continue attacking Zhang Fengjai and Zhuang Jian. They raised their arms and pointed at them, and then used more vicious words to insult them. This also made Zhuang Jian, who was furious, want to take the submachine gun in the hands of the armed police and shoot these old people who were confused by Buddhism in front of her. "Let me do it." He stretched out his hand to hold Zhuang Jian's shoulder, motioning her to go behind him, and then looked up at the more than 100 white-haired old people who were angry, with a trace of pity and grief in his eyes. In fact, since the moment Buddhism came to China, the debate about whether Buddhism is good or bad has never stopped. But there has never been a winner in the debate. However, after more than a dozen dynasties, some truly knowledgeable people have long seen through the hypocrisy of Buddhism, but they have to continue to support and protect Buddhism due to practical needs. 3 months before leaving Shushanjiang village, a good friend of my third grandfather once chatted with him about the dispute between Taoism and Buddhism when he was a guest at the Taoist temple, which made him truly understand the difference between Taoism and Buddhism. Now, facing the indignant accusations and insults of more than 100 white-haired elders who were easily deceived by the bald monk, his inner understanding of the relationship between Taoism and Buddhism has become more profound. He did not refute for the time being, and there was no anger in his heart. He allowed the unwarranted accusations and insults of more than 100 white-haired elders, and allowed the disgust and hatred in the eyes of the people around him to gather. This also made Solitsi cry with heartache, and made Zhuang Jian have a strong murderous intention against the bald monk. He waited until more than 100 white-haired elders were exhausted and took a break temporarily, then he signaled Solitsi to let go of the jade hand that supported him, and then walked towards the crowd, and said to himself in a hoarse and low voice, "Since the establishment of Taoism and the introduction of Buddhism into the Central Plains, the battle between Taoism and Buddhism has never really stopped. For the land of China, is Taoism better or Buddhism better? Is Taoism hypocritical or Buddhism hypocritical? Combining the practices of Taoism and Buddhism in the past dynasties, I would like to express my own views. Taoism teaches Chinese people to strive for self-improvement so that they can be virtuous. Buddhism teaches Chinese people to put down their butcher knives so that they can become Buddhas immediately. But now, facing the complex and changing international situation, whether to choose Taoism that strives for self-improvement or Buddhism that shrinks its head, I believe you have your own decision."